Welcome. So, you have found our very first episode of the Humanity Assemble podcast, and we are so excited. So, knocking it right out the park, we have Simon Ateba with today's News Africa. And Simon stopped by in a major way. So, before we introduce him, look down below the tickler. Simon is on Twitter. He's also on Substack in his own name. So make sure you show him some love and subscribe to both of them. We are also at www.humanityassemble.com. So go check us out and see everywhere you can find us at. So this episode is special, not only because it's the first, but because we have seen Simon everywhere. He is the White House correspondent that is in the briefing room that you have seen featured on Tucker Carlson and elsewhere. So today we were lucky to have Simon here, and he did give us the dish. So he told us the scoop about what really goes on in the White House briefing rooms. We also talked about his new book that's coming out. So I tried to squeeze a little bit of information out of him. We talked about his family upbringing and his culture. And we finally ended it with what's next for Simon. So we are excited to get into this. But it wasn't perfect. So let me do a little disclaimer. All through the interview, I was trying to gracefully wipe my eye. I was not crying. It is April and my allergies would not let me be great. So there's that. But today, let's get into this. And thank you for helping us assemble humanity one piece at a time. Nice to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you, Christy, for having me.
Great. So our guest here was so nice to join us. This is Simon Ateba with today's News Africa. So you guys have seen him as a White House correspondent. You've also seen him blowing up all over Twitter. So we are honored that he agreed to join us today. It's early, but we are going to get this done, right, Simon?
Yeah. It's actually like, I think, almost 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C.
Right. So Simon, I've read that you are on hiatus right now because you are writing a book. And I have kind of dived in a little bit, into your life, where you had your life risked in Nigeria and then you were arrested in Cameroon. Can you tell us a little? I mean, I don't want you to don't spoil your book.
Yes. So it's been an interesting book. So my book, I took a 2-week break from the White House briefing room so I can complete my book. I've been writing it for a few months, but when you want to complete a book, you need to be focused. So I just took a 2-week break to do that. It's an interesting book. I've had a beautiful life. Adventurous life, I would say. Born in Cameroon, live in Nigeria, studied there, and went from there to the White House. And, with all the things along the way, being kidnapped in Nigeria, dumped in the woods and left for dead, attacked by pirates on the Gulf of Guinea with an AK-47 to my head, but survived. Arrested in Cameroon while doing an investigative report on Nigerian refugees in Cameroon and Chad, kept in a dark cell, only to, get to the US and thinking that, everything is okay, freedom is here, and to face challenges in the Biden White House, being sidelined and also trying to find my way and trying to say that the First Amendment has to be respected, still believing in the US and believing that the US is still the most advanced country in the world because of those freedoms that the people here enjoy. And so that's my book, and I believe it'll be an interesting read. I won't go into details so I don't spoil it, but I'm still conflicted with one key thing that I need to add or remove from the book, especially in my early age, when I was about to be born. But I don't know yet. I still have these 2 weeks. So I won't be at the White House this week and next week, but I will return sometime in May.
Well, that's fascinating. I look forward to reading it and also helping you definitely promote it and your story, because we need more stories about you. I mean, you are the best of what we want from America, right? We want people coming over here to America, hard work, still believing in the American dream and making it succeed. We will get to the White House stuff, but I do want to stick with Simon and what makes Simon Simon. One thing that I have spent my life focused on is fathers' rights. And in fathers' rights, I have really tried to promote more access to fathers having opportunities. I'm sure you know that there is an issue with Black Americans and single motherhood and fathers, and it's not that Black men don't want to be great fathers to their kids, it's that
Yes.
sometimes they just need more access. So as a legal mediator, what I do is I help them in any area that they need, but especially if they're going through a divorce, with getting access to their kids. And we here at Humanity Assemble, we promote fatherhood, strong fathers. So can you tell me, I mean, because you had to have had a strong support system growing up to become the person that you are, the excellent man that you are. So can you just tell me a little bit about that? Just a little hint of what we're going to
Yeah.
see.
So actually, I didn't have, like, I grew up with my father, right? Many years, but we had many conflict because my father divorced my mom while she was pregnant for me. And so it was tough, but then eventually I ended up living with my father and his wife. And it was tough. It was tough to, I remember my mom telling me when she came to visit, and I was calling my dad's wife, my mom, and she was a bit jealous. She was like, your mom, and I don't know, she told me when it was just both of us. But so I tried to recreate that family for me, for myself. And uh, it wasn't, I didn't have everything. Yes, I had a father, I had a mother, but my mom wasn't there. My mom was somewhere else. But, you know, growing up in a house where I had a father, I, so I had that, how will I say it? There's that, I don't want to call it authority, right? But
Mhm.
that respect, I could see my father's role as a provider. As my father was actually the provider, he was the one making the money for the family, the food and everything. And my mom was the person, that's my father's wife, who is also my mom, was the person implementing my father's policy. So she's the one who will take care of the food and decide who gets what. And she was tough, but growing up in a family where there was a father and there was a mother, I believe that helped me a lot. um, it was a bit hard for me because my mom usually visited. She was, I always you know had that conflict. Who is my mom? Is it my father's wife, or my real mom? But being in a family where I had a father and a mother really helped me, and I was able to see what a dad does, what a
Right.
mom does. And I was able to learn it from that age. And that's why even here in the US, when I go out with someone, maybe on a date, or I'm most Africans, we always, except they don't have money, but most Africans, when they are comfortable, if they take you out, we pay. It's still hard for us to embrace that culture of splitting the bill. And yeah, we don't really know how to do that. When an African takes someone out, uh, especially a man, you're expected to pay. You're expected to take care of the bill. You're expected to take care of the family. You're expected to take care of your children. You're not expected to split the bill, share the bill, but also the woman is expected to take care of the kitchen. So that's
Uh-oh.
yeah,
Uh-oh.
which doesn't really work here, right? Like in Africa, the father will provide the money, the resources, but the woman will take care of the kitchen. She will cook, she will take care of the kids, and and so here is a bit different, right? Like the father will work, the mother will work. Do we all have money? Do we split the bill? All of them can cook. The man can cook. The wife can cook. So you have to adjust a little bit when you come from Africa to the US.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a little adjustment, but essentially, and one thing that we promote here at Humanity Assemble is traditional conservative family, right? So, man and a woman, marriage, union, everything falling in line. So, it's not that much difference. I mean, yeah, we do have difference in roles where men and the women may both cook, both may work. I know I talk a lot about when both parents started having to work 40 hours outside of the home, that's when you really see, I think, our society kind of start to crumble, because who's raising the kids if both parents are working 40 hours outside the home? So you really do need that village and that support system, and a mom and a dad are essential. And I didn't talk to you before this interview, so I didn't know that you had two parents growing up, but I could tell from the values and the strong man that you are. And when I knew that you had a great solid upbringing, when you were in the White House and you were sitting there and you were so frustrated because they had these actors, but yet they wouldn't call on you. And when the one reporter stood up and he started chastising you and pointing his finger and saying shame on you or whatever he was saying, and you sat there, you didn't get up, you kept your composure. How difficult was that in that moment?
Yeah, so it was tough. And that guy also, last year he was booted out of the White House Correspondents Association because he became violent in the Rose Garden. His credentials were taken away from him during the Trump administration because he was disrespectful. And he used to fight the Trump press secretaries. That's the guy who was, he used to yell, he used to shout out questions, and to the extent that at some point his credentials were taken away from him and he had to go back to court to get them back. And so that was pure hypocrisy. The guy who he was also sacked by his media organization because he was rude to President Bush. So you can go back to President
Wow.
Bush to see all the chaos and hell that guy has raised. But it was really hard for me to see other people who connive with the government and gang up against you, and instead of doing their job. Those who are listening to us now, watching us, need to understand how powerful the presidency is. The president of the US has so much power, can send people to war. Many of them go and die and don't come back. Those who come back, they return, they're traumatized. Some of them don't have all their limbs. They come back sometimes without hands, without legs. They've sacrificed so much for the country. And and as a journalist, knowing that this person has so much power, your job is to question them, ask them tough questions that the American people really would like them to answer. And the briefing room has only 49 people. And so you don't have a lot of people in there. It's a small place. 49 people can sit down, and you have a few other people who stand. Maybe maximum 60 people who will attend maybe a press briefing. It's a small place for a country that has almost 320 million people. The bottom line is this: most people cannot be in the briefing room. Most people are not journalists. And while you are there, your job is to question the government, ask them tough questions. You're not there to become their friends and try to praise them. But I really understand it's easy, right? Most people come to Washington to change the system. But when you get here, you become comfortable. You travel with the president on Air Force One. You come to the White House. You have the Secret Service, a beautiful place. You wear a nice suit. You're on TV, and if you have a good relationship with the government, you send them them your questions or your topics in advance. You do beautiful stories about them. The, you become comfortable. On Sundays, you're on TV shows. Everything's really comfortable. People begin to know you. Your classmate, they see you on TV. Now you're making more money because now you become an analyst on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, or anywhere. And now you have hundreds of thousands of dollars. Excuse me. And it's difficult for you to abandon those things. And
Yeah.
at some point you become afraid because now you don't want to lose them. And if you become antagonistic or ask the real questions or investigate the government, you may end up like Julian Assange. They may jail you, they may frame you, they may blacklist you, they may sideline you, and you don't want that. And when someone like me comes in and asks those questions and challenges the government, you actually attack the person and you connive, you join the press secretary, you actually fight your colleague because you want to remain in the good book. And they are right, because the next day the press secretary comes and she calls on the person who attacked me, and the day after she calls on the person who attacked me, and she continues to give him questions, because it's almost like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So it was really hard being there and being attacked by colleagues.
Right. And you can even see her at that moment kind of smile a little bit. It was like a slight smile as he was doing that. And I'm not crying because of your story. My eye is watering because I've been up since 5 a.m.
Yeah, me too. I have my lips.
It is kind of wiping
I have
my
dry lips, so.
but you have just beautifully explained why Americans have lost trust in their media. Like, we no longer, and a lot of people blame Trump, for our lack of trust. No, it's not. It's through COVID. We've seen what the media has done. And this is why people like your very good friend, Tucker Carlson, why people love him, because he's not going to just, say what everybody wants him to say. And I know you've been on Tucker several times, and and we've loved your appearances there. But you are really a man of the people. I mean, I follow you on Twitter. Your Twitter has blown up. You really are the people that the person that people are starting to look to as that independent journalist who's out here going to try to ask the tough questions. If he's called on. Now, let me talk to you just one more thing about conservatives, Democrats, that whole thing, because I've heard you say, kind of similar to my own story. So being brought up as a Black American, I was, I say I was born a Democrat, even though my family was conservative. All of our roots are conservative. Your family that you're talking about, that you told us earlier, is conservative. But, if you're Black, you're automatically assumed to be a Democrat because, a lot of times you hear, oh, conservatives are racist, So I started a campaign. It's called Swing Your Vote. And it really is getting people. Now, sometimes it's hard to tell Black people, okay, you need to become, Republican, because they have bought into the idea that it is a racist party, even though it's not. But I just say, swing your vote, become independent, and let the political parties fight for your vote. Let the system work as it's supposed to. So you coming here from Africa, you talked about how, it took some time getting used to, the conservatives' ideas and dealing with people as people and individuals and not the group mentality. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so exactly. The Republican Party, they are not the party of racists and all those things. But it took time for me to really understand that. Just to give you an example, in 2020, our publication Today News Africa endorsed candidate Joe Biden, for the presidency. And the reason we gave in our editorial was racism. The New York Times told us Trump was a racist and he had used the S-hole word against Africans. And we were not going to support someone who was, a racist and, hate Africa and all those things. And so what we did was, I didn't want to have anything to do with conservatives or, Republicans and GOP and all those people. And we endorsed Joe Biden. So when Trump was in office, I used to go to the White House. I wasn't a full-time correspondent, but we had more access to the White House. He gave more press briefings. There was more access. More people came to the White House. But when Joe Biden came to the White House, I began to realize, even though I was full-time and had a hard pass, the White House hard pass to cover the White House and consider myself to be more liberal, I began to realize that, there was little access. Journalists didn't have access. He wasn't granting press briefings. And when he was granting press briefings, Africans in the briefing room were not invited to attend. To give you an example, in 2022, in December 2022, President Biden hosted the second U.S. Africa Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C. There were 50 African leaders who attended the summit. And even though 50 African leaders were attending the summit, the press secretary didn't even call on me or call on any African who was covering the White House to answer questions about the U.S. Africa's Leaders Summit. A week before then, the president of France came to the White House. It was a big visit. He came in, there was a state visit. Everyone, the cabinet members were invited to the White House to greet him. The journalists who are from France who covered the White House, they were given the opportunity to ask multiple questions on multiple occasions. But when it came to Africa, we were not treated the same way. And so when I got to the White House, I didn't know all that. I was this guy trying to be the good guy and trying to even ask good questions. My first questions at the White House was a softball question. I asked if people should apologize to President Biden, those who called him Sleepy Joe, if they should apologize to him, because he wasn't dead on the job. He was still doing his job, and he was old, but he was there. He was kicked, And because of that, it took time for them to give me. It took months. I had to go to Jen Psaki's office, who used to be the press secretary to President Biden, multiple times to ask her, why don't you call on me? Eventually, she called on me and I asked that beautiful question. She liked me so much because it was a beautiful question. And she said, no, the president is doing his job. But then in November 2021, after she's given me a few questions, the US banned 8 African nations because of the Omicron variant that South Africa was able to identify. For identifying the Omicron variant, how did the US react? The US actually decided to ban them, not just ban South Africa. They also banned 7 other countries around South Africa. 6 of those countries had 0 cases of the variant. At the same time, the variant was in the UK, in Hong Kong, in the US, in different places around the world, and they didn't ban those people. So I challenged them. And when she tried to use fake figures in the White House, I called her out. And she was embarrassed. She was angry. She didn't want to talk to me anymore. And I was able to see her true face. She showed it to me when I went to her office after the exchange that we had in the briefing room. Just imagine, let's take a step back. Imagine if President Trump had banned only Black African nations because of a variant that was in the UK, in Hong Kong, in Europe, in different places. They will tag him a racist. He will be on CNN every day, on MSNBC every day. But I realized those people were not reacting that way. They were banning African nations. They were not having enough explanations. And when Dr. Fauci came to the briefing room, I also challenged him. And so what I realized is so I went from being this good guy, this friend of theirs in the briefing room, to the bad guy who just embarrassed Saki, and she didn't want to talk to me anymore. And I realized she didn't respect me as a journalist. She thought that because I asked a good question, I used to ask very sweet questions, that I wouldn't challenge her when, when they do something wrong. And you know, our publication today, News Africa, focuses on ties and interaction between US and Africa. And we do that because we understand that as China rises, as Russia expands influence in Africa, there's a need to strengthen ties between US and Africa. We believe that it is in the interest of Africa and in the interest of the US to have strong ties with the US, because for US and Africa to have stronger ties, because of democracy, because of freedom, because of all those things that people in the US have enjoyed for a long time. Those things are not in China. In China, you have one guy who is in power. He can jail his opponent. He can be there for as long as he wants. The same thing in Russia, where you are Putin. He's in power. He leaves. He comes back. He can go to war. He can jail political opponent. And I don't want that for Africa. I want Africa to look a little bit more as the US on the positive side. You know, the US has its challenges, but it's still the most advanced country in the world. It's still the country where you have more creativity, more freedoms, more of what Africa needs. And so, and I realized once I tried to do my job, I was attacked, I was sidelined. And when the new press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, came to the briefing room, she began to do exactly the same thing. Once I challenged her,
it was worse.
Even worse, yes.
Yeah.
She began to do it worse, and she began to attack me. She wouldn't call on me for just doing my job and asking the question that the American people care about. The bottom line is this: it's about the job. You need to do your job. As a journalist covering the White House, my job is not to be her friend. My job is to do the job, ask the question, do the stories, do it in a fair and balanced way. Once you fail to do that and you begin to connive with the government and be friends and attack your colleagues who are trying to do their job, you've lost credibility. And that's why people don't trust the mainstream media anymore, because you're no more telling the truth. Advertisers have so much influence. And you know, you end up just doing the bidding of the government in power, which is sad.
Now, I know you are independent, sir, but this is why conservatives love you, because you are that fair and balanced. You are there to still uphold the tenets of what it is to be a journalism. And we thank you. And we want you to still fight for that independence, fight for, towing the line and asking the hard questions. Final question. What's next for Simon? So you have a book, you're, a social media, superstar now. What's next for Simon?
Yeah, so first thing is I want to ask people who are watching us to keep praying for me. Pray for me for wisdom, pray for me for more understanding, for protection, and pray for me for strength. It can be a lonely journey when you're at the White House and try to do your job, and people are afraid to associate with you because they'll be labeled your friends and they won't be called on. And so eventually you end up really in a lonely journey. And so that's why I have a book, my book, that's why I'm taking a 2-week break to complete my book and talk about how I feel being in the Biden White House, being isolated, being sidelined, sitting there for months and not getting called on, seeing how the disrespect, seeing how Africans come to Washington, D.C., and you are not even allowed to ask a question. Going through all the stuff that I've gone through, being born in Cameroon, and moving to Nigeria, and getting to Nigeria and becoming really an influencer. I used to be on TV and talking about the national issues in Nigeria, and people used to challenge me. They would say, but you just came into the country. How do you know so much about our issues? But I'm a journalist, so I used to travel around across the country and seeing people, and many of them, even though they were born in Nigeria, were not really traveling across the country to really see live and talk to politicians and civil society and different people. When you begin to do that and begin to understand people's culture, it changes you a lot, and you begin to have different perspective. So people should pray for me. They should keep encouraging me, and they should go to my Twitter page and subscribe to, follow me, subscribe to Twitter, subscribe to my Substack, simonateba.substack.com, and also buy my book when it comes out. But more importantly, is for them to pray for me to continue to push hard to do my job, and make sure that the First Amendment, which protects the freedom of speech, association, and even gives you the power to challenge the government to seek redress, will be upheld. That's all I will ask them to do. What's next for me is to keep doing my job, keep pushing, keep having people follow me on Twitter. I've had more than 300,000 people who have followed me in the past 4 months alone, and which is great. And I think the reason people follow me is because I respect them. I pledge to be honest. I pledge to be fair and balanced, and to tell them the truth, and to give them the facts and truth, and make sure that people can make their own decisions. What happens is people become entitled. They believe that they are superior to people. They look down on people. They believe that because they cover the White House or fly on Air Force One or have hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and now they believe that they don't need to engage with the people and thank the people and ask them questions and allow them to participate in the conversation and encourage those conversations. As a result, people turn their back, even if they're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. And I don't want to do that. I've decided not only to report the truth and the fact, but to engage with the people and allow them to have a voice.
Right. And I'm a witness because I do follow you on Twitter. And after this, I am going to subscribe to both your Substack and your Twitter. And I do look forward to reading your book. And I personally want to thank you because I am making a career change going from the legal field and getting into journalism. And this, sir, is my first interview. So it has definitely taught me to take my allergy medicines and maybe not wake up at 5 for the first interview. But I do want to thank you because you are a role model for many people, like myself. You are a reminder that we can be, fair, balanced, ask the tough questions. We don't need another softball reporter that's in the pocket, of the White House, no matter if it's a conservative or a Democrat. So I personally want to thank you, Mr. Simon, and I hope that I can have another interview after I've read that book of yours because I am fascinated about your story.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Humanity is Simple podcast. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be notified when we drop videos in the future. Follow us on our other platforms and continue to help us build humanity one piece at a time.